only mode.
Hello, welcome to today's webinar. This is Trevor Brown from Juniper Systems, and I just wanted to wait for just a minute or two longer. We'll go ahead and get started once a few more people join. Hello and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Trevor Brown from Juniper Systems, and we're going to go ahead and get started. And here is my contact information here. Bear with me one moment. There we go. Again, my name is Trevor Brown. I'm the Natural Resources Market Manager here at Juniper Systems. On the line, we also have Steve Comby from Electronic Data Solutions. They're one of our business partners supporting the Pacific Northwest and surrounding regions. Today's topic of our webinar is going to be fisheries data collection, and particularly looking at low-cost and practical applications that can be used in conjunction with the Juniper Systems line of field data equipment. So here's the agenda for today. We have, first starting, we're going to give a brief introduction about Juniper Systems and Electronic Data Solutions. We're then going to talk about and just kind of look at the overall data collection methodology and process and provide a couple of examples of what we're going to be showing today. We're then going to talk about practical and low-cost options for fisheries applications. And then the majority of today's webinar is actually going to be set with demonstrations for 5 different fisheries applications. And if you have any questions along the way, just use your GoToMeeting questions chat dialogue, and you can send those. We'll try to get to all of the questions during the webinar, but if we don't, we'll be sure to follow up after the webinar with your questions. And we are going to shoot for about 45 minutes, so it should leave some time to spare at the end of the hour. So again, thanks, and let's go ahead and get started. All right, Juniper Systems. If you don't know our company, we are a US-based manufacturer of ultra-rugged field computers. Here you kind of see a picture of our building. There's our product line down below, so we make a lot of different ultra-rugged field computers. We are affiliated with Campbell Scientific. They are one of the world leaders in making data loggers that attach to all kinds of sensors and various equipment. Okay, next I'm going to let Steve Comby describe Electronic Data Solutions.
Thanks, Trevor. Electronic Data Solutions has been partnering with Juniper Systems since the inception of the company, so we're going back 27 years with this relationship. We offer a variety of hardware and software solutions, complete with technical support, training, and repair services. Our main office is in South Central Idaho in the community of Jerome. We currently have 25 employees and 5 field offices serving mostly geographical areas within the western United States. We have a variety of software programs that we write. We also do custom software. We'll be showing 2 of our software programs today and showing you how those can optimize your field data collection. Thanks, Trevor.
Thank you, Steve. Let me go to the next slide. Okay, and I'm just going to kind of roll through these slides kind of quickly as we want to save a lot of time for those demos. So just to give you an idea about Juniper Systems, we are a relatively small company with about 110 employees, but our reach is pretty far as they're used in extreme environments around the world. Here's some examples of different types of applications that we serve across the world. All right, this slide is just meant to depict that we have a very long history at Juniper Systems. We've been called Juniper Systems since about 2001. However, our company history goes back very far, and Fisheries customers and applications were one of our first type of use cases for our handhelds, serving NOAA out of their Seattle office. Here's again another picture of our complete product line. So depending on what type of data collection you're doing, it may cause you to choose one or the other. For example, do you need buttons for kind of rapid data entry versus high precision GPS, or if you want a little bit bigger screen, as with our Mesa here. One thing that's common across all of our products is that they are made ultra rugged. They can be dropped, put in water, thrown off building. They really are meant to be used as a professional data collection part of your toolbox. So that's how they kind of differ from consumer grade type devices, that these are meant to be used day in and day out, collecting valuable data that you want to make sure and protect, and using it for a very long time. So along that line, our handhelds are meant to last. This is actually a recent picture of that office from Seattle for the NOAA office. These are one of our first handhelds that were built in the 80s, and there's a fleet of about 30 or 40 of these that are still being used today out on boats to monitor the ground fish monitoring program around Alaska. All right, here's a picture of our Mesa Rugged Notepad. Very brilliant screen. Kind of like it fits nicely in the hand, but has that really large screen that people, particularly with GPS and mapping, appreciate. Here's our new Archer 2. This screen it's the best that we know of on a mobile device. Ultra rugged, compact, excellent for fisheries types of applications. Really nice GPS inside as well. Here's our Allegro MX. This is hands down the most popular data collection, data recorder that we make that's used for fisheries application, and that's primarily because of those big buttons that can be used for really rapid data entry, for what we call high production data entry, where you can really enter a lot of information, really glove friendly, and so that's why it's the most popular. So yeah, that's the introduction of our company. Now we're going to talk about just the data collection process overview for fisheries types applications and provide a couple of examples. So if we look first, every project generally has some sort of database. That could be an advanced database like an SQL database, Oracle, things like Microsoft Access. It could be a geodatabase for geographic information systems, such as, for example, an Esri ArcGIS. There's some other specialized environmental monitoring databases that do a really good job of integrating sensors and other equipment, such as 7Node DataSite. But many people just use Excel as their database, and that's perfectly all right, depending on your application. So generally, there's some process of data exchange to send a project over to your rugged field computer. Generally, then there's field data collection, where there's some data collection out in the field. Here's a case with our local Utah Department of Natural Resources. I believe that's a razorback sucker. They're using the Allegro MX with an electrofishing project. After field data collection happens, it's sent back to the database. And then ultimately, we want to export, view, and publish that information. And it could be Excel, it could be maps, it could be other formats that allow you to run statistics and things of that nature. Here's another view of the process. Really, on the left, you see the paper method. So you have a process to create a spreadsheet or your database. You write those field notes on paper. You then go out to the field, write down your information on paper, and you may be carrying a bunch of other equipment like GPS, photos, RFID, barcode sensors, etc. Ultimately, then you come back to the office and you manually enter those back into the database, and then you manually integrate this other equipment as well. We're going to be kind of talking about this process here on the right, where you still have that kind of upfront work to create your database or spreadsheet. You have a little more work to create your mobile forms that you see on your handheld. And then ultimately, the benefits that you get by this approach is that you can record your data directly on the field computer, where you can then keep your data protected. It standardizes your data collection, so you have data quality checks. You make sure that anyone that's assisting you, such as seasonal labor, is collecting data all in the same format, as well as you can directly integrate your other information from GPS, RFID readers, photos, that kind of stuff. And then ultimately you get back to the office and you synchronize directly to your desktop computer, saving you the time with that data entry. And then it's along with that process, you're ultimately reducing data collection errors. And then once you have this set up, you can repeat that process over and over again. Integration with other devices, very common with our handhelds, and that's what we consider ourselves experts in doing this. These handhelds are used to integrate water quality sensors, RFID. You can scan your RFID reader right into when you scan a fish, it'll go right into a specific field that you specify. Other examples are, our partner in New Zealand, Lat37, makes a wireless fish measuring board. There you see some Allegros used to measuring what look like a ground fish there, and so when they put them on this board, the data is just being automatically sent directly into your rugged field computer. So today we're going to talk about, we're going to provide a netting example, and it's a gill netting example, but it could apply to fyke nets, any other kind of nets. It's a very similar data collection process. We're also going to look at electrofishing data collection process. Could be a boat, could be backpack, however you're doing the electrofishing. We're also going to look at a monitoring example. In this particular one, it's a vessel example, but it could be dockside monitoring, catch and stock monitoring, hails, that type of information. We're also going to look at how to integrate sensors, such as a multi-parameter water probe. It could be RFID, et cetera, as well. Also, we're going to look at a survey example, in this case a physical habitat survey, but it could be a count survey, it could be any other type of survey as well. But that doesn't mean that this applies really to a really wide range of other applications. Anything related to GPS and mapping, navigation, marine protection areas, research, anything that you can think of that really has a field data collection form. All right, so moving through our agenda pretty quick. Like I said, we want to keep most of the time available for demos. The last thing we're going to talk to before those demos is going to be just this mobile software comparison matrix. We just made a simple matrix here, and it's a lot of information, and no need to digest everything, but because we will make this available on a recorded video at the end of the webinar as well. But we're going to be looking at a couple of different software applications. One is called Data Plus Professional, and the other one is Mobile Data Studio. And the third is Hydro Plus. And each of these, depending on what you're trying to accomplish, one may work better for your application than the other. So, for example, the customization in all of these things is really good, actually. And you don't have to be a programmer. You don't have to spend loads of time to be brought up to speed to learn exactly how to customize these things. They all do that pretty well. The external sensor connections, Hydro Plus and Data Plus really are meant to work with these external sensors and are designed that way. Mobile Data Studio, there's some kind of tricks to make, for example, to integrate your RFID, but isn't quite set up the same way as the others are. Data quality checks, they all do this very well. GPS integration, they all do this really well. If you're collecting a lot of photos that you want to integrate with your data collection process, Mobile Data Studio is excellent for that. Database connectivity and database export, all of them do this. Mobile Data Studio is probably more strong at data can synchronize directly into a number of different databases, and so it's really good at that. Full keypad support. If you're doing what we call high production data entry, where if you have a big bucket of fish, for example, and you need to kind of really jam through that and enter a lot of information in a quick amount of time, fish flapping around everywhere, there's nothing better than a Data Plus combined with the Allegro MX, where you can just really knock out a lot of data entries in a short amount of time. The other ones are more, like for example, Mobile Data Studio and Hydro Plus are geared more towards things like surveys, other ones where you're not, or research where you're not entering in massive amounts of data in a short period of time, but they have their own strengths. So we'll be talking about some of those, and as a reminder, we're always here to help. We can give you recommendations. There are other options, and if you are doing something, for example, like a lot of spatially intensive GPS and mapping, we may go and recommend a different option for you, but these are just a few that we wanted to highlight today. They're very low cost and very practical. All right, let's jump right into the demonstrations. The first one we're going to talk about is a netting data collection demo. And I'm going to turn it over to Steve to go ahead and describe this, this process.
Okay. Thanks, Trevor. The application we'll be discussing was originally developed for a gill netting application, but it can really be used for any type of netting application, whether it's spike nets, trammel nets, basically any type of a process where you're collecting a lot of specimens and then need to weigh, measure, possibly identify the specs, recapture, mark, things like this. So what we'll be showing today is a data sheet running on the mobile field device, and then we'll actually go to the software that would reside on your laptop or your PC and show how you would essentially create or build that application without having any programming knowledge. Trevor, could you advance to the next slide, and I'll show kind of the starting point for a lot of these applications, because people have a history of working with paper data sheets, is looking at that as an example. And on your typical paper data form, you have header information at the top, and then all of your sample is recorded at the bottom. So we'll be setting up and running a similar application on the Allegro MX. And Trevor, if you could give me control here, we'll go ahead and show this. So let me kind of center my Allegro. So I'm going to be running, what you'll be seeing live is the screen of my Allegro MX. And I like to run these applications on the Allegro MX. They'll run on any of the Juniper Systems products, the Archer, Archer 2, Mesa. It all runs very well on there. But as Trevor mentioned, if you're doing high production data collection, it's really valuable to have a full keypad in front of you, and especially the large numeric keys, so you can really crank through the data collection fast and keep up with the guy that may be processing the fish, which is kind of typical on the vessel or on the shore. You'll have somebody doing the weights and measures and typically somebody writing the data down, but in this case they'll actually be entering that data into the field computer. So this is a good combination right here. We've had DataSite out for over 2 decades now. We developed it in the early 90s when most of the rugged field computers on the market were running a proprietary operating system. And we realized that people wanted an application where they could create their own field forms without having to pay a professional programmer or learn how to program themselves. So this has evolved over the years, and we've kept up with the current development. We moved it to DOS platforms, if many of you remember those, years ago, and have now been trying to keep pace with all of the Microsoft Windows mobile operating systems that Microsoft has been kicking out. So with that as the introduction, this is the main sign-on screen. So when somebody runs Data Plus from their start menu, this is what they would see. Then you tap on the menu button, and from there you would go to the app button and then go to select application, and then I liken this to opening a file cabinet drawer and say, okay, what am I going to be doing today? And you can scroll down through there and see all of the different data sheets for which you want to collect data. So tap on the, I call this one fish data, and you'll see that the currently loaded application is displayed in the middle of the screen. And then from there, we tap on Menu Data, Collect Data. And if I pause during the day, or if I'm doing a week-long study, I'm hiking around or doing something, I can always open currently created files, or I can go create new, which is what we'll do in this point. So I'm going to tap on that, and I'm going to enter a data file name and tell it to create that. Let me try a different one. There we go. Now I created the header information on this so that it automatically grabs the date and time off of the internal time clock of the instrument. And that's just a simple formatting thing that I'll show you in Data Plus. So you enter your crew information, and you'll notice that as I move from field to field, that I have a custom help bar down at the bottom that tells you specifically what to enter when you advance to that field. And then below that, I have some additional help or function keys so you can see what each one of those keys does. So we'll key in another name here. Set our net number. So the scenario here is that we're out on a lake or a reservoir, and we've installed a bunch of gill nets previously, probably the day before. Now we're back out ready to pull those nets. So we'll have navigated to where net number 1 is. Now I have this one set up so it reads the latitude and longitude off of an internal integrated GPS receiver called the AMXU GPS pod, which is inside of the Allegro. But since I'm inside here, this is probably not going to grab any data readily, so we'll just bypass that for now. But this is actually a good way of marking the exact location where you put your gill nets. So if you're doing annual sampling and you want to sample from the exact same spot, you'll have that information. Now we've completed all of our header information, so this is the information that stays constant and appears at the top of the form. And now I want to advance down into the data collection portion of my screen. So I'll press the F5 key, which you'll see there says advance. And when I'm prompted for a species, I can enter this data a number of ways. I'm going to press the F2 key, which is my list button, and that's going to bring up a list of all of these fish species that I put in there. Now you'll see that there's a what we call a string, a translation, and a meaning. So when I press that F2, I can cursor down, highlight a fish, and hit enter, and then begin to enter the weight and the length as that information is called out, or in fact I may be doing that myself, which incidentally is another justification for having a rugged waterproof device like this. If you're handling these wet slimy fish, putting them on the length board and then on the scale and then keying this information in, obviously all of that junk is going to end up on the device you're keying that into. So now let me show you some ways that we can speed this up. So I've entered one line of data. I'm going to hit the down arrow key. Yeah.
Related to that last comment you made, we did have a question here asking what the devices are capable of in terms of underwater submersion.
Okay.
Maybe that's a question for yourself or Trevor.
Okay, I can address it since I'm babbling on here. And Trevor, if I get this wrong, correct me. I believe to get the to meet the specifications, they had to be tested under 6 feet of water for 30 minutes. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So for people that are snorkeling or diving, I don't think it was a device that was intended to actually be used underwater. The concept was to look more for accidental submersion. It gets kicked off the side of the boat, or if you're walking up a stream electrofishing and you happen to do a face plant in the river with this, but it's going to survive that, and all of your data and programs are going to be intact.
Right, and one additional kind of comment with the Allegro MX is it does actually float as well. So I don't know that that was by design, but it floats, and we've tried it. I've tried it a few times.
Great, thank you. Now I'm going to show you some tricks here that I've done to speed up my data collection. You'll notice when I press this button here and shows me my help list that all of these species are number coded. So I can use the large numeric keys to enter these species really quickly. So I'll enter a few more here. Notice just by pressing 2 and hitting enter, it loads left pectoral fin. I drop down a line. If I press 1, hit enter, it's going to load RBT, which is the code for rainbow trout that I've got in there. So we can really move through this quickly by using specialized tools like that to speed up the data collection. On line 5, if I hit 5, it loads mountain whitefish in there. So instead of having to go down and keying in MWF or the full name, I can numerically code things and just really speed along in my field data collection. So just a trick that you can use in there, I can add as many columns in this application as I like. All of the data is automatically saved when it's entered, so I don't have to worry about hitting a save button. When I'm done at this particular net and want to jump in the boat and motor off to the next location, I hit my F4 button, back up to my header page or my first level, do a page down, and I now have a clear form that starts out, and I can begin entering that same data on a clean data sheet. So we would put net number 2 in here. If we were outside, oh, there we are, grabbing some data through the corner of the office here. And then hitting F5, and you'll see that I have a clean data sheet starting, for this net 2 that we're now on, and we proceed along the same way that we were before. So we can really move quickly through this. And I think that gets the point across for this netting example. So we'll just back out of this. And I'm going to shift my Allegro MX a little bit out of the way here. And what I have open here is the first screen of our Data Plus Professional application generator. So when somebody buys Data Plus Professional, they would get this application generator where they can build as many field forms as they want to keep track of. There's also a host program that comes along with it that handles your communication back and forth with your mobile field device, and then there's a handheld field license included with that. Now, if you're trying to mobilize a large crew, you may only want to purchase one copy of the application generator, but possibly multiple 5 or 6 field licenses, so everyone in your staff going out to the field to collect data will have the field license running on their mobile handheld. But let's take a look at our application here. So in level 1, you'll see that I have my date, time, crew, etc. So if I go to the data format tab, you can see that I'm just telling it whether the type of data entry is character or numeric, how many sizes to hold, and how many decimals. And then you'll see if I go to a place like time and go over to data entry, I can make a selection to grab the data off of the internal time clock of the unit. And with date, you'll see that I'm just grabbing the auto month, day, year off of that. When we're looking at things like sensors, such as the latitude, longitude being read from the GPS receiver, my data entry will be through a COM port within the unit, and I just need to define the information on the COM port. Now, when we drop down to our data level, we were doing some tricks with the species and the mark columns, so I'm going to highlight species, jump over to air check, and you'll see that I'm doing an air check type of list file. I can also do range checks, so if a number needs to be within a specific range, you can identify that range and it'll alarm on anything. Now I'm going to just quickly click on edit, and you'll see how I created those. If I wanted to add another fish here, I would just click on add, give that a code of 9.
Hey, Steve, could I jump in with one more question?
You bet.
Relevant to what you're doing there. We've been asked, are there limits to the numbers of species that can be entered into the populated lists?
No,
No,
there's no limits, just practical considerations. That there might be easier ways to do things if you're if your species limit is running up over 3 digits, you're putting over 100 species in there, there might be some better way to do that. But no, we didn't put any limits on this at all. Thanks, Kirk, for that question. So after you've made those questions, after you've made changes, you just save. And to update that, you go up to the top here, and you have a save and compile that you'd press, and those new changes are made. And then I would go to my host program and just send that new modification back over to my mobile handheld. So we'll be touching on Data Plus a little bit more, showing some other applications. The last thing I'm going to show here is when you use Data Plus Host to retrieve your data. And here's the screen that would come through with that. You basically end up with an Excel file. This is showing some data from a couple of years ago. Everything's parsed and lined up in its own little columns. We also have a MDB converter that you can purchase with this. So if you want to put that data directly into a database that you're using, we make that easy for you as well. I'll give the controls back over to Trevor now and have him start running with another application.
All right. Thanks, Steve. Okay, and I'm actually going to show another Data Plus application and how it applies to electrofishing scenario. And actually, like I mentioned earlier, it could be for a boat or for a backpack. Here's a picture of, again, our friends at the Utah Department of Natural Resources doing some boat electrofishing on the Green River near Dinosaur National Monument. Here's, actually, they have a similar type of program, and let me show that one as well. You also have, this could be the same scenario based on the backpack electrofishing. So if there's some scenario where you're collecting fish and either entering them right when you catch it or entering the data at a fixed interval, this works quite well. Here's an example of their paper form, and this is, it would have stacks and stacks of these things that they're filling out, every 5 miles on a river mile. Where they're catching, doing a lot of invasive fish removal. You get a lot of, again, similar to all of these paper forms we see, we always see some sort of header information, that might include some water chemistry information, the river mile, the pass number that they did, the pit batch, for example, if they're using passive tags, as well as just date and time information. Then you start seeing that each individual fish record. So that was a smallmouth bass, and you just see they just kind of drew a line down there to indicate that that's the same type of species of fish they're doing. Total length, weight, ripeness, maturity, sex. Was it a recap for did it have a tag already? And there was other information in here like GPS, but they had probably a we were told a 2 to 3 month process at the end of a field season of entering in this information, and that through using the Allegro MX with the Data Plus application, that reduced their kind of data processing for an entire summer, more than 20,000 fish records, down to just like about a week is what they were saying. So if we go over and have a look at that application, let me bring this up really quick. I'm going to bring up Data Plus. I'm going to actually bring this sheet up as well. Bear with me here. Okay, here's my Allegro connected to my computer as well. So if you remember on this paper form, let's have a quick look at it again. If you remember on the paper form, they had the header information and then each individual fish. So if we go back to Data Plus, all we've done is just gone and matched all of that site level header information and added fields for each one of those as well. And just the same process as Steve described, you go through for each field, define whether it's a number, a character, whether you want to put some data quality error checks in there, whether you want to define a little help message to help them understand when it looks on the screen, and then just kind of having, this would be, so for example, like your sample or your date, and then you have the native fish and all of the fields associated with those, and the non-native fields associated with that. And when you see the data, the final data output, you'll see a kind of sample ID at the the top level, and each individual fish will have a sample ID as well that rolls up and connects it to this sample, for example. So when we go and look at that on the Allegro MX, you see all of that header information, very similar to what you saw with Steve's. When I press this F5 button here, just like I've defined native and non-native, when I press F5 on the Allegro MX, I have native and non-native, just like you saw before. Mostly they're catching a lot of non-native fish. And then I have this very similar process. When I press this F2, you see my list of possible species that they're trying to target and remove. Now, what ends up happening, though, and similarly you've got length, weight, sex, maturity, ripeness, disposition. I think we even have some more fields if I keep scrolling to the right. Yeah, some notes for each of those fish. But what really kind of ends up happening is you're entering in a lot of fish, and in a single day it's possible to catch like 2,000 of these things, and so you really don't want to impede the data entry process. So you enter a few little tricks. All I'm going to do is press that down arrow button. It automatically carries over that same species that you entered previously, and that's just a setting that I put because I know typically I'm catching the same type of fish. I don't want to have to re-enter that. Then it's a matter of just moving very quickly through each record. If I enter so many fish, I know that for if it's a male or female fish, if I push F2, 0 means female and 1 means male and 2 is unknown. So I'm going to get out of that. What ends up happening, you just push those buttons, 0, and then you're done with that fish. And I'm going to escape back to the main screen, actually. Oh, bear with me here. I'm going to escape back to the main screen. Here's an example when I look at our native application. Here's an example where the users are inputting directly their tags from an RFID reader. So they have a 400 kilohertz tags and 134 kilohertz tags that they're checking for. When they're getting into this information, if I'm just pushing the down, it's looking for a GPS point. Again, I'm indoors, that's not going to work out. It has the date information, where it was caught. All of these I can make required fields as well. Okay, so if they have a 400 megahertz tag, they need to check for those old tags. They would just enter yes, or in that case, that was no. Let me make sure that if it's yes, you saw a little message that says, okay, enter your 400 megahertz tag. At this point, they would push the RFID reader button and it would go directly into here. If it's no, so it's making me enter, I made that a required field. I'm going to say no on this one, and I'm just entering in mock data. Again, they wanted to scan it twice, and I'm just entering in the data. So it's a very similar process that you saw with Steve's as well. Now, after the data process, you end up getting your site level information, your sample ID, all of that information coming across, your native fish. Again, here's that native sample ID that rolls up to the same number that you saw on the previous screen. So at that point, really it's a really fast data entry again. In this case, they're catching up to 2,000 fish per day, so it's something they could really do in a very fast process. So I'm going to turn it back over to Steve. I think he has another application here. Bear with me one moment. Let me get back to the presentation. He's going to show us an example of a physical habitat survey with one more Data Plus application before we move on to a couple of different types of software.
Thanks, Trevor. Yeah, I know you're getting a lot of Data Plus today, but there are so many unique things that you can do with the Data Plus software that I wanted to show at least one more application on here. And the reason for that is you'll see if we look over here to the far left that we now have multiple levels. So the level 1 is my header information, and then I have 2 levels underneath that. So you can see on this physical habitat simulation model that they're running, they would establish a transect, and then at each site they're collecting a lot of different data on substrate, fish cover, doing bank measurements at the left bank and the right bank, riparian canopy, riparian understory, riparian ground cover, and then human influences, and there's different banks under each one of these. So I'm going to go over here to, now that you've seen this level laid out there, I'm going to go run the application on the Allegro, and we'll move through this rather quickly. So you can see in the center of the screen that I now have a different application up, and that was just put on there simply by going to Menu, App, and selecting that particular data sheet. So we'll collect data in that. We're going to create a new one again. And on the site here, we'll just put a number in there. It's taking today's date. And then their transect list on this consisted of alphabetical characters, so we'll just select one of those. Now you'll notice that when I press the F5, the function button to advance, that I have a whole bunch of sub-programs or sibling programs to choose from. The first one that I want to show you is fish cover, because we did some unique things with this too. In addition to just building your data forms in Data Plus, you can also write custom routines. And one that we did right here is we wrote a quick little routine. Honestly, think it took one of our programmers all of 10 or 15 minutes to do this, but it auto-populates that first column of fish cover. So this whole thing is just for each one of these different types of fish cover, we put a different rating on that. So anywhere from 0 to 4, representing absent, to very heavy cover greater than 75%. So I'll just go down this list and put a number in for each one of these. And the only thing that it's going to allow is a number from 0 to 4. So I can just keep moving down the list, typing those characters in there. And I'm essentially done completing this portion of the survey. Now to change to a different sibling, I would just press my Alt F5 key, and now we can jump straight over to doing our substrate measurements. So on this, we just choose which bank we're starting from, how many meters into the water we are, what the depth is at 1 meter away from the bank, the size class. So I basically stand there in the water, reach my hand down in there, and whatever I grab at that 1 meter mark, I put that size class in there and then record the percent embeddedness for that particular item. So I can keep doing this all the way across. And as Trevor showed, a really great trick here would have actually been to set that up as an auto copy feature, so it would have just copied that left bank down there. If I move over to the 2 meter mark, just do the same thing. Take a depth measurement, reach my hand down in there, what am I grabbing at this point, and how embedded is that particular rock, piece of gravel, etc. that I put in there. And then once I'm done with this, Alt F5 takes me yet to another measurement that I would do for this, and on I would go. When I'm done, I can just back up out of this. If I change a new transect, I can just put that in there and start with a clean data sheet. So this is what it would look like on the PC program over here now. So if we were setting up the substrate, here's the different fields I have there. For fish cover, same thing. So very easy to create these, and then it downloads the data just like we saw in the previous applications. So there's a lot of flexibility within Data Plus. It's easy to use. Trevor, at this point, are we moving on to a different application, or are we going to Hydro Plus?
I think we're going to go to Hydro Plus at that point.
Okay, so I'm going to keep controls of my screen here, and I'm going to bring my Allegro back up. I'm going to escape all the way out of Data Plus.
In fact, I'll go ahead and show kind of the example slide here. Bear with me.
Great.
Okay, so now we're kind of switching gears to a different software application that's really meant to be customized, or really meant to be integrated with various sensors and other type of equipment and view as a display. So you're using your handheld as a display to see the readings from these various sensors and everything. And I'll let Steve go ahead and describe that a little more.
Okay, thank you. Hydro Plus CE software is a software that our company developed, again, going back about 2 decades. What initially drove this is we had customers coming to us saying, hey, I've got this rugged handheld, I have this GPS, and I have a water quality probe. I want to combine everything into one screen so every spot that I'm going out and taking water quality measurements will have a lat long and altitude associated with that. So that was the genesis for our Hydro Plus CE software. And just like Data Plus, we've been updating it over the years to be compatible with all of the newer handheld operating systems that are coming out. It has some really neat features for it. You see an example sample screen to the right there that shows how your water quality data and your GPS data are integrated on one screen. So when I tap the line log icon, everything is logged together on the same line. So if I go back to the office and I'm putting my data into a GIS, I have the water quality from every XYZ that I visited that day. We've also incorporated some QA/QC features into it where you can set your own criteria for stability and then cause color changes to happen to the screen or to the data specifically when those parameters reach your criteria for stability. So this eliminates a big variable for a lot of people that I call station time, that if somebody doesn't allow the probe to thermally and electrically stabilize, you may have a lot of erratic data if you're visiting these sites on a monthly or quarterly basis and then trying to look for changes. So that stability notification is a big feature. Trevor, if you'll give me controls again to show my screen, I'm running the exact same Allegro that I was running Data Plus on, but I just went to my Start menu and tapped on the Hydro Plus icon, and it immediately forms a screen up and a connection with my integrated GPS receiver and my attached water quality probe. Now this is a big savings for you because we know that most of our customers that are doing fisheries data collection also do a lot of water quality data collection. So if you can save roughly $2,000 that most manufacturers charge for a proprietary piece of hardware that makes up a display for your multi-parameter water quality probe, and instead connect your water quality probe directly to the Allegro, this is a really big cost justification, allowing you to purchase a handheld field computer that can be used for a lot of different applications, from field data collection to water quality, GPS, GIS, a wide variety of input. So this is what our main screen looks like. I've got mine set up so unstable data is shown in red. As soon as it meets my criteria for stability, it will turn green. And at that point, I can go ahead and start tapping icons to log the data to a location that I've already identified within the unit. Now, lastly on this, we have a really nice communications program for it called Hydro Plus Host, which really simplifies your data download. You just simply walk back in from the office with your handheld field computer, and again, this can be the Allegro, the Archer, the Archer 2, the Mesa. As soon as you do a USB connection and the computer recognizes the mobile device, it'll automatically grab all of your water quality data and park it in a folder with that day's date on it. So you don't need to do any manual transmission of data by clicking on anything. And then very last, this is compatible with 3 different brands of water quality probes, In Situ, YSI, and HydroLab, so we can interface with all of their multi-parameter probes. Trevor, I'll hand controls back over to you now.
Okay, just a moment here. Let me bring up the screen. Okay, bringing it to me here. All right, so we're back to the presentation. Thanks, Steve. All right, so the last one we're going to have a look at today is called, it's a little bit different than the other previous ones that we looked at. This one we're going to use the use case of a sea urchin monitoring demo, monitoring program. So, you know, this we have a couple of different customers doing the sea urchin monitoring. However, it really relates to a lot of catch monitoring. So it could, like I was talking about earlier, it could be dockside monitoring, onboard auditing, and catch monitoring. But a lot of these paper forms that are required by the different fisheries agencies to go on board, and because our devices are made ultra rugged, they're widely used to go out and and basically replicate those paper forms and kind of simplify that data collection process. Again, one thing I wanted to emphasize with all of these programs that we talked about, we've kind of shown you the application, how to generate the initial applications. So there is some upfront work to do there, but once it's passed over in a handheld form to the crews or the seasonal workers or people like that, really they don't have to interface with that kind of desktop application generator. Really, it's a process of just giving them the handheld. They collect the data. When they get back to the office, they put their handheld in a cradle or connect the USB or wirelessly in some cases if you want to get a little more fancy. And then the data is just automatically sent to either directly to a database or to a spreadsheet like we were kind of demonstrating earlier. So this program is really great. It looks great on, it actually works with any of our handhelds, but it's particularly useful for the Archer 2 and the Mesa, where there's kind of a more touchscreen data entry type process related to a survey versus that high production data where you're just trying to enter massive amounts of information about each individual fish. So in the sea urchin monitoring demo, running on an Archer 2. It's a little more compact than that Allegro. Here's another picture from our partner at Lat 37 again in New Zealand, doing some other sea urchin monitoring. In this case, they're using an Allegro MX. But the paper form that we're going to use as an example is from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, Canada. Here's it looks like I've grabbed the scallop monitoring document, but it's actually very similar to the sea urchin monitoring paper form as well. But again, could be lobsters, could be anything. It just matters. Each of these things can be customized to match in each of your individual fields. So just like we were talking about before, there's some kind of header information. Where you were doing your surveying, what's the vessel registration number, the vessel name, the license, the crew, that type of information. Then you have kind of each individual line related to the tow. So they're using a tow rake system, and they're raking the scallops from the bottom, and they're meant to add GPS, where it was done, the date, the number of tows, and the average tow time. Ultimately, they want to see the hail confirmations as well, and having some hail carryovers as well. They have buyers, buyer information, and then you can add pieces as well for the captain's signature and name. So how that one looks on the handheld, let me switch over here just a moment. Bear with me. Let's bring up that Allegro or Archer 2. And I'm going to bring up Mobile Data Studio. So this would be the mobile application generator for the Archer 2. So you have a process to go through where you design your application, and again, you just kind of choose each of those fields. In this case, they call it a point. You choose all of these different options, and in order to add a new one, like if I wanted to add a GPS point or kind of a drop-down selection, if there's some calculations associated with it, a sketch point, which would be a good one for us to capture a signature as one of your data fields. There's a camera. You can integrate a geotagged photo directly into your data collection process. So you just choose the one you want, and you basically are going through and simulating that paper form. So in this case, we've gone through, we've added pages over here. There was the vessel information, there was the log information related to the scallops, there was the slip information, and then there was the hail information as well that you wanted to add. And this is just kind of your application builder. There's a process where you just install your application. You push the install button to your connected device, which I've already done. Here we go. Here's how it looks on, let me go back here and put it on the first page. You've got your vessel information, and just how you see that date sailed, date landed, we're going to go ahead and fill out some information here. So I've just set it up this way, and so I would be doing this with a glove or a finger. When I choose, there was 3 options for gear. We're going to choose rake. There was the region option, vessel registration number, vessel name, there's your license number, and there was an ETA as well that you can just tap, and then you could modify that if you want to. Number of your crew. Again, all of this was all things that we found on that paper form, the gear width meters. And then you have a way to just jump to each of these different other screens that you have. So here's your log information. We'll go ahead and finish this record. Okay, I don't have a GPS here in the building as well, but when I tap this, it would ultimately put my GPS coordinates in there. Just going to go ahead and kind of quickly enter information. Again, when you were entering this from the handheld, actually you would push this and you would get a nice big fat button that's finger friendly, that's glove friendly. You know, maybe I want to put a bunch of numbers like that. Again, in this particular one, just choose. When I get to the slip information, I'm looking at buyers. This is a feature you could apply. You can do some pretty interesting things, and it's not hard. You don't need special programming skills. When I select buyer 1, these are the fields that I wanted to have shown. When I select buyer 2, these other fields pop up. So there's really dependent fields that you can set up. Finally, enter some hail information, but I think you get the idea. Hail confirmation. And we're going to go ahead, and they call this finish my session. And I did one previously right here, but here's the one we just did at this point. And you see I've set the time. I need to match it to my handheld, but that's very easy to do. So I've got these two paper forms essentially that I've created. When I get to the office, I can choose to have this information go just automatically when the device connects either through a cable or through Wi-Fi. When you walk into the office, the data will drop directly into your Access database, or there's a number of different databases. You can just have it drop directly in there, so you can eliminate that paper process. Now, Mobile Data Studio does also have an internal database that you can use, and we'll go ahead and have a look at that. So here is, I'm going to close the design window down, open up the database window, and I have one record previously created. There's the GPS position that I collected earlier. And you see all my records in a spreadsheet type format. I'm going to pull this one over manually by pushing a button, but as I said, there's ways to set this up, very easy ways, where it just drops automatically in here. I'm going to choose Active Sync. It's downloading my data. And now you see those two records that we just entered. And from this point, you can run with it however you want. If you want to use this internal database, you can, I think there's something like 1,000 records would be your maximum, which may be perfectly fine for some. But if you don't, if you have a lot more records, you can just export them to Excel. And there's a lot of different options. Or you can export them directly to, for example, you would point to your database, and this again would be a one-time setup. And so that's really Mobile Data Studio. It's a really handy, practical, user-friendly application. It's very easy to train, and you can really match it to your data collection process. So going back to our presentation, there again was the paper form that we replicated. And just to give you an idea of the type of effort, once you kind of learn some of the basics of Mobile Data Studio, this replicating the one that you just saw was really an effort of about half an hour to 45 minutes, and that was just kind of fine-tuning things and adding the right drop-down lists and those kind of things. So we're not talking about like a monumental effort. That's really the end of our webinar. We'd like to open it up for questions, but just so everyone's aware, we're happy to provide recommendations for your specific application. We're very passionate about fisheries applications, and we'd love to hear about projects and love to provide recommendations. Please consider us if you would like to collect data with a rugged field computer, and we do have demo equipment available. So if you have a project and you want to kind of try before you buy, we do have demo equipment available. I want to thank Steve from Electronic Data Solutions as well as Simon Anderson from LAT37 in New Zealand, who provided a lot of the pictures and content for this information as well. So if there's any questions, we'd be happy to take those now.
Trevor, there's a number of questions that I see in the question panel. Do we want to go through each one of those one at a time?
I think, you know what, because of the time, if it's okay, we can reply back to each of those individually by email, but maybe we take a couple right now and then just call it good, and and we will make this webinar recording available as well. Just either send us an email and we'll just reply back with the actual recording, and that way you can check it out or share it with others.
Trevor, this is Kirk. I've answered a lot of the questions
Great.
one-on-one, but there are a few that I've selected that I think are applicable to the group.
Okay.
Just a few minutes ago we were asked, with the Mobile Data Studio, can you pre-populate routine fields like vessel name, operator name, gear, such that you don't have to enter those fields each time?
Yeah, Mobile Data Studio does do that, and we have done that on one particular project that I'm thinking of, where they were actually having data coming from Microsoft Access, and they had this kind of pre-populated information, and so you can have that information viewable and visible. Then the crews would go out and actually enter the additional information, and then data would be synced back to. In that scenario, we used like a staging database, and so data was staged there initially, that the data they wanted the crews to see, and then that was pushed to the handheld, and then the crews would enter information. Data was then synced back to that staging database where it was viewed and checked out before the kind of database person would allow it to be live and put into their real database. So there are options like that. There's also a few other forms that we didn't review today that do that very nicely. So yeah, that's certainly possible.
Good, thanks Trevor. Just a couple questions about pit tag readers. Anything integrated with the Allegro via Bluetooth or internally?
Are there any that do that? Is that what you're saying?
Are there pit tag readers that can connect via Bluetooth, or do you have one built in? Yeah,
so we actually, with the fisheries types applications, typically in a very low frequency type scenario with 134 or even the older 400 kilohertz, we have many examples of pit tag readers. So there is an RS-232 serial port on the top, and just like you would connect to a GPS or some other type of external water quality sensor, for example, it's the exact same process. It's very nice. You can just set up that field, and you align that field to the same communications port as COM1, essentially, from that serial port. And when that field is active within Data Plus, you just push the enter button, or I'm sorry, you push the read button on the reader, and then it will just automatically send it right into your field within Data Plus. That's one of the most handy features of Data Plus.
Good, thanks Trevor. I think we'll just do one more and then try to answer the rest privately, if that's all right.
Sure.
We were asked if Steve could repeat the 3 different water probe brands that work with Hydro Plus.
Oh, yeah, thank you. The 3 different brands of water quality probes that work with Hydro Plus are the YSI, what I refer to as the 6 series, so any of their multi-parameter probes that begins with the 6. The HydroLab 4A and 5 series will all work with it, and any of the in situ 9000 or 9500 series will work with it.
Great.
Thanks, Steve.
Great. Hey, everybody, thanks very much for spending the hour within this webinar, and we appreciate it. And again, send us a note if you have any questions or would like to see a recording of this webinar. Thanks very much, and have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.